mislim, da še vedno aktivni in zagnani. Letna srečanja sicer potekajo že od leta 2014, ko je bila predstojnica Doktorske šole profesor dr. Katja Breskvar, ter so se nadaljevala in nadgrajevala v mandatu moje neposredne predhodnice, profesor dr. Aleksandra Mrčeva, ki je tudi tukaj z nami in sem zelo hvaležna, da si je vzela čas. Tovrstni dogodki so priložnost za izobraževanje in tudi druženje, za katerega vemo, da ga doktorski študenti kar malo pogrešajo. Zdaj bom prišla na angleški jezik, dogodek je namreč kombiniran v obeh jezikih, imamo približno 20% študentov, mednarodnih študentov na doktorskem študiju. Dear speakers and participants, welcome to the annual meeting of Doctoral School at the University of Ljubljana. After 2 years of being online, we finally meet in person. The topic of this year's event is research data management for doctoral students and their supervisors. As you know, good data management is essential throughout the whole research career of a scientist. At the University of Ljubljana, we would like to prepare our future researchers already during their doctoral studies. As part of this so-called data management training, doctoral students are now required to submit a draft of the research data management plan with their dissertation proposal, usually in the second year, and again later with their dissertation. The events, such as the one taking place today, are here to help students and their supervisors complete this particular task, at the same time addressing the concerns and providing answers to various questions that come to mind. Before we begin with plenary lectures, it is a great pleasure to announce our guest of honor, Professor Dr. Gregor Vladić, Rector of the University of Ljubljana. Thank you.
Lep pozdrav vsem. Ne govorim o angleščini ali slovenščini. Boste kolegom prevedli, ki so iz tujine. Lep pozdrav, veliko čast mi je, da vas lahko pozdravim na tem srečanju Doktorske šole. To je zame eden najpomembnejših segmentov naše univerze. Doktorski študenti ste tisti, ki ste prihodnost naše univerze, pa ne samo naše univerze, ste prihodnost slovenske in tudi mednarodne družbe. Vi boste vodili družbo v prihodnih letih v novim izzivom, ki jih ta trenutek zagotovo ne manjka. Soočamo se številnimi problemi, globalizacija, neenakosti in nenazadnje verjetno najbolj pereč problem klimatske spremembe, ki zahtevajo čimprejšnje, da ne rečem takojšnje ukrepanje, in tukaj moramo znanost postaviti neke rešitve, kako bomo lahko rešili naš planet, ki je dejansko, kakorkoli obračamo, po mojem mnenju, ogrožen. Taki dogodki so zelo pomembni, zato da se srečujete doktorski študenti z različnih fakultet. Naša univerza je, kot si veste, velika, imamo 26 članic, 6000 zaposlenih, 40 000 študentov in dostikrat delujemo nekako en mimo drugega. Sam ena glavnih stvari, ki bi si želel kot rektor, pa je, da postanemo bolj enotna univerza, bolj povezana univerza in take dogodki zagotovo prispevajo k temu. Današnja tema je izjemno pomembna, saj znanost doživlja zelo, lahko rečemo, celo potrdi tektonske premike v zadnjih letih. Ugotovili smo, da vrednotenje znanosti, kot je bilo v preteklih desetletjih s točkovanjem, ne pelje kako nikamor. Znanost se je zapirala v neke točkovne, samopoštene stolpe, pozabili pa smo na to, da znanost mora služiti družbi. Naša naloga je seveda, da opravljamo izvrstno raziskovalno delo, znanstveno delo, prispevamo k svetovni zakladnici znanja, a zelo pomembno je, da to znanje predvsem prenese v družbo. Ne govorimo tukaj samo o prenosu gospodarstva, ki seveda je tudi pomembno, ampak o celotno družbo. Znanost mora biti tista, ki ni zaprta v samopoštenem stolpu, ampak deluje kot svetilnik družbe, ki šmerja pot družbe kam naprej v prihodnosti. Poleg tega vrednotnega raziskovalnega dela so zelo pomembni premiki na področju odprte znanosti in pa kar vključuje tudi odprte podatke, zato da bomo povečali medsebojno sodelovanje, kot tukaj rečemo interoperabilnost rezultatov, odprta znanost, mislim, da je zelo pomemben segment teh eksperimentov znanosti in če smo nekako že osvojili odprto objavljanje v revijah z odprtim dostopom, tukaj seveda še veliko problemov, ker v osnovi bo to namenjeno, da nekako pridemo od te žurnalokracije, ki obvladujejo privatne založbe z izjemnimi dobički. Ne, če veste, znanstvene založbe so gospodarska panoga, ki je najbolj dobičkonosna od vseh gospodarskih panog na svetu. In če smo to objavljali v odprtih sistemih že nekako osvojili, pa mislim, da nam še precej manjka do ravnanja z raziskovalnimi podatki, zato mislim, da je to zelo pomembna tema za današnje srečanje. Vesel sem, da imate dva odlična predavatelja, kolega Sedeja iz Univerze v Gracu, član naše mreže Slovencev po svetu Smula, in pa kolegico Fišer, ki je dokratno izbrana za izjemno ugledno mesto, mislim, to velika čast za univerzo, direktorice Klarin, infrastrukture za jezikovne podatke, tako da sem prepričan, da bo to srečanje izjemno zanimivo in pomembno. Želim vam uspešno delo, lepo popoldne in hvala lepa. Jaz se bom mogel pa žal malo posloviti, ker moram še en drug dogodek na fakulteti za arhitekturo, tako da žal ne bom mogel postati z vami. Hvala lepa.
It's a great pleasure for me to introduce our first speaker today, Professor Simon Sedej, a University of Ljubljana alumnus. Professor Sedej earned his Master of Science degree in 1999 at the Department of Biology, and then his PhD degree in 2004 at the Medical Faculty University of Ljubljana. He continued his career abroad, first at the European Neuroscience Institute Göttingen, and then at the Medical University of Graz, where he is currently an associate professor and group leader of Basic Cardiovascular Research Unit at the Division of Cardiology. His research focuses on the cellular processes and molecular mechanisms determining cardiovascular health during natural aging and conditions of metabolic stress. Professor Sedej has published extensively in top journals in this field, and has participated as a PI and as a researcher in numerous research projects. I'm very pleased to say that he has kept strong ties with Slovenia. He occasionally lectures on his research at the University of Ljubljana, collaborates with scientists at the Faculty of Medicine in Maribor, and has acted as a member of the Small Council, the University of Ljubljana Global Alumni and Associates Network. Today, his talk will be on fair research data management in the field of biomedicine. His talk will be in English, but you are of course welcome to ask questions either in English or Slovenian. Okay, so Simon, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for this warm welcome today, dear students, dear supervisors, colleagues, friends. Here, everyone, good afternoon. So, I think that this point now here, as it was already mentioned in the introduction, it's fair to say that I'm not an expert on the topic I'm going to talk about, but I'm someone like you, or many of you are researchers, so I'm going to actually talk about from a researcher's standpoint of view how we can handle fair research data in biomedicine. So in my talk, I will cover actually three aspects. I will touch or mention what is actually a data management plan. Then later on, I will move and try to convince you why is it good and necessary to have a research management plan, a data management plan. And most of my talk I will dedicate then to give you some advice, a glimpse of how, in my opinion, you could deal with your problems or specific questions to address and make your own data management plan. We all know we live now in an open science environment, which makes knowledge accessible and free for everyone. So I think one of many aims that we need to address is that we improve research efficiency, and this can be done by existing knowledge that we have available. This will also provide not only to improve our research efficiency, but also to improve reproducibility and the validity of our data. But of course, this doesn't come without a cost or an expense of something. So one of the challenges we are facing is that we need to actually approach our data, our research in a more systemic fashion, and we need data management plans in this regard. And actually, there are guidelines out there that can help us to achieve that, and our data that we generate, collect, should be made available according to these 4, I sometimes add another principle here, which are called FAIR principles. So first, our data should be findable. Second, accessible, interoperable, reusable, and we should be also able to re-evaluate our data. So in other words, or in more simple terms, is that we should actually make our science or our data as open as possible, but at the same time also as closed as necessary, because we might deal with some sensitive data in this regard, and we need to protect them, we need to protect our intellectual property, we need to protect those that generated this valuable source of information. So I'm pretty much sure that everyone here knows what is data management plan. So just if I briefly summarize, is that the data management plan explains how we researchers will handle our data during and after our projects. So this is one of the things that we need to consider. Second one is that it actually covers or includes many aspects of data collection, not only collecting, generating data, but also sharing, archiving, organizing, curating, and etc., etc. So this actually covers not only a particular type of data, but it also actually explains that we need to somehow deal with everything that we generate or collect in a similar fashion. So when it comes to text, different spreadsheets, images, videos, recordings, models, software, whatever you can imagine that we generated, we should actually be able to know how to deal with that. With one single purpose, this is that we implement the open science to make scientific research and data, again, freely accessible. So now imagine, you know that there is a document outside and you cannot find it, or maybe you find it and you don't have access to it, or maybe you do have access to it, but you don't have the right software. And these are all things that actually this data management plan considers. So, in other words, we all scientists, researchers, have essentially need to describe, before we begin with our research, at least 4 points. So, what data we will generate and how the data will be documented, described, secured, curated. Who, of course, will have access to this data, apart from us and our supervisor or our colleagues. And also we need to explain any data sharing, and also we have to use some restrictions sometimes that we cover, or we actually then preserve the legal and confidentiality issues. So this is shown here at the bottom right. As you can see this circle. And I think that much more important is to understand and know why we need to develop a data management plan. And I think I put here now some reasons why actually we could profit from doing so. So there are a couple of quite some benefits. I think, I hope you will agree with me, that managing and sharing our data can really help us to improve our research. Perhaps the most obvious one is that we can much easier find and understand our data when we need to use it. But probably maybe much more important is that it makes us ready for any possible problems that we might encounter on the way of doing our research. And much more important so is that we can prevent these problems to happen. One important aspect is that I believe that this data management plan can really improve our communication between or with the supervisors and colleagues, of course. And I think that it will also really faster, so help us to spot or to recognize the needs for any support we need during our research. Apart from that, what I mentioned also, we will probably avoid any necessary duplication or multiplication of our data, and it will allow actually for validation of our results and also then to share our data, which will then lead us to improve our research, to advance our research, so to generate also high quality data, and essentially also improve or increase the number of collaborations, which we all depend on research. So science is a teamwork. And I think one of the last or many other important benefits is that it will make our research much more visible, which is really necessary nowadays, and will gain a greater impact. So we'll get recognized for what we have generated. And of course, last but not least, it will enable then also other colleagues, researchers, to find our data, use these data, sort our data, and so we gain credit. Citability, higher citability will increase the recognition of our work. So many of you among the audience are students, and you are provided with a template here on the left-hand side. There are many different templates out there. There are different online tools, softwares, even companies that can help you to generate a data management plan. But this one, I think, is a very good one that needs to be implemented, or will have to be implemented also at our university in Graz. And it covers actually these 6 core requirements that actually one data lifecycle contains. So you are here where the plan is, and then you need actually to lay down in this plan how and what type of data you will collect, generate, produce. So by doing so, then you will have to analyze those, and then at some point you want to publish this, share this data, store of course, and then reuse. And I think that this draft actually covers most important aspects, and it's not so exhaustive as you might think. So actually there are 3 different sections that I want to cover in the rest of my talk. So one section is type of data and methods used for data collection and production. Second one is how data will be stored and protected during research for a doctoral thesis. And the last one is the long-term availability and storage. So this is actually the shelf life of our data. So essentially in my talk, I will talk first about data collection and production, and the second part of my talk then about data storage, protection and availability. So first question that you are asked in the draft is what data will be collected or produced. And you can address this by giving details on the kind of data, so you can give numeric values or textual information. You can mention whether you're going to collect, produce images, audios, or videos. And also you should then give important details on the data format. So you know this very well, this file name extension that are mentioned here. And why is this important? Because this will allow them actually to share your data and reuse your data also by others. So you should then stick or apply standards, norms that are accepted by different data repositories. You should stick to those repositories that are trustworthy, and I will come to that in a few minutes. And you should use the software or any equipment that can help you, or also others, then to read this data. You should give also a preference to open and standard formats. So this will help you then to facilitate and to then also reuse of your data on the long term, in the long run. And if possible, if you know already ahead, you should mention how big, how much, the amount of data you will generate or collect. The second question is how will new data be collected or produced, and or how will existing data be reused for the purposes of your research project. And in this regard, you could explain what methodology you will use or software to generate the data or collect the data. And then also you should mention for those who are going to review your data management plan about the structure, how you're going to sort, organize your data. And maybe if there are any constraints on reuse of existing data, like for example license use that you might need to, or someone else to retrieve this data, and then also to consider what other documentation like metadata is needed to enable the reuse. Some of you, especially those who are dealing with perhaps clinical studies in biomedicine, will be confronted with dealing with sensitive data. And if this is the case, or is going to be the case, the valid question here is that how will you ensure compliance with the ethical requirements when generating such data? I mean, this is a very broad topic that cannot be covered now here in this presentation, but if you really want to dive deeper into this topic and stick to the ethical requirements and those laid down by ethics committee, I advise you to consider or to consult these documents here at the bottom. One is the Ethics for Researchers that was published by the European Commission, and the other one the European Code of Conduct for Research Integrity. So these are essentially issues or things that should be mentioned in your plan, where you can demonstrate that you are aware of these aspects, of these issues, and how you will deal with those. Perhaps we can touch more on this than also during the workshop with some of you who want to visit. The second part of this template or draft that has been proposed by your university, your institution, is how data will be stored and protected during research for a doctoral thesis. So one of the questions is how will data be stored and backed up, so actually copied then during the research process. And one of the recommendations I would like to give you is that store data please in these two separate locations. This will mean that actually you are aware of that you will describe where the data will be stored and backed up during your research, and then also you can mention how many backups or how many copies you will make. One important thing is that when you will generate the data management plan is that you should be brief. You don't need to spend a lot of text, give lengthy explanations. We scientists would like to have like really short, brief, concise text, and also the reviewers. So it's very important that you don't write too much. Just remember, as necessary as needed. What I discourage you and do not recommend is that you store your data, especially precious data, on your laptops, which I unfortunately do myself as well. Please don't use external hard drives. It happened to me recently that those data were overwritten by a student. And I discourage you not to use USB sticks, because those stored data will not last for long. So, in other words, you should lay down or mention in your plan what storage you will use as a backup, and what support service can your IT or your institution can provide. So if you will be dealing with sensitive data, how will you keep it safe and secure? So you can explain how the data will be recovered in the event of a technical incident. This applies not only to sensitive data, but to any kind of data. It's important to mention who will have access to the data and how this access will be controlled. And I'm sure at the University of Ljubljana have policies in place that can protect and this sensitive data from any other thefts or any other misuse. So the last thing I would like to mention is the long-term availability and storage. So it is about where you're going to store this data after your publication, like for example different repositories. So there are two aspects that you would need to address here. One is to explain how the data will be made available for reuse. So that means that you should choose a repository from a trustworthy list of those repositories that can store, protect, save your data. And the second one is to explain how and when the data will be shared. The Next question is, do you plan to restrict access to the data for a certain period? And if this is the case, you should explain the reasons. So you should again indicate, mention who will be able to use the data. You should describe whether potential users will need specific tools, different softwares, metadata, any explanation to reuse what you generated. Then maybe some of the data will need to be destroyed after some time, and you should mention when and how. And also you should think about which data will be kept and which data should be discarded or destroyed ahead. So one of the last aspects you might think of in addressing your plan is to explain who will be the owner of the data. Of course, this is the institution, but also probably the supervisor, especially those who have any position who will have access to this data, so to say, lifelong. And one thing that you should really think about is intellectual property. So in case if you really have some novel, original, innovative findings, you should make sure that the IPs of the intellectual property is really then protected. When it comes to clinical science or clinical data, you should think about anonymization or pseudo-anonymization of your data. I think you know about that, or maybe even encrypt your personal data. And one important thing that applies to many fields of research is to get informed consent, not only by medicine but also in human sciences. So, in other words, actually, data management plan is a live document. It's something that is being actually always updated. It's not something that actually you write once and it stays as such forever. But during your study, during your research period, during your PhD, you will lay down the grounds, and during the PhD study, you will update this plan, and in the end, you will have, I think, a very strong data management plan that you will submit along with your thesis. With this, I'd like to thank you for your attention and invite you to the workshop for a question and answer session. Thank you very much.
Imamo 5 minut za vprašanja, 5 minutes for questions, so any questions? Okay, I have a question. How do you implement research management plan? Do you have anything at your university, the University of Graz?
No, we don't have. We don't have it yet. Actually, our agency requires it when you get a project, like when you get from Mars, you need to provide a research data management plan. But at our university, we still don't have it in place. But it's in preparation. So it sounds really that it's just a matter of time when it's going to happen. And actually, I'm very happy that the university from Vienna is well ahead. So you are really, I think, in time of addressing the open science issues.
Thank you. I'm wondering, when this happens, what would you prefer? That one colleague from the research group is a data steward for the group, or that you have a system in place of data stewards at individual faculties of the university?
Oh, wow, yeah. Both has advantages and disadvantages. Of course, we need in the first place to rely on our colleagues, workers, students. We have to teach those. And we always need to get support, knowledge, expertise, experience from others. So this is something that actually is probably, so to say, within the research team, within the family, that we need to cultivate. I know that our university has like 3 pages amendment to the policy that how we should keep good scientific practice by addressing these issues that I mentioned today. But I have to say, I would never let my data generated in the lab to third persons, to someone else. When it comes to the publication, put it in the repository, this is something else. But when it comes to research, it's very important that the data stay within the lab, within the group, and we find the right place to protect the data. Because essentially this is actually what will lead us to the next publication, to the next paper, and this is actually the proof of the high or maybe low quality of research we are doing. So this is really something that will make us hopefully different from the rest. And it's very important for you, I mean, to know that after publishing a paper, I don't know if you know that, but I'll tell you that you need to keep your original files, original data, traces, whatever you generated for 10 years after the date of publication. So it's not something that you forget about it once it's published, that's it. You will need actually to make this available upon request, of course, still 10 years after the date of publication.
Kakšno vprašanje? Če to? Imamo čas še za eno vprašanje? Okay, then I have another question, maybe a bit provocative. I always ask people, you know, like scientists who deal with data management about this. So why is it that researchers are, appear to be annoyed by, these requirements about data management? I mean, the feeling is that a lot of them would prefer not to have to deal with that.
I agree, actually. I mean, really, honestly, it's something that perhaps really annoyed me, myself as well. But I have to say, a couple of years ago, when we were called to file this data to a top-tier journal, and also in past years, then I realized the real value of these. So it's a matter of reproducibility, credibility, validity of the data, copyright if you want. So in other words, you put a stamp that you are the first who generated this, and actually no one else can take this away from you. So it's really something important nowadays when the science is open, when everyone can actually access to all these documents, that we are aware of this. It takes some effort. However, it's also on us that we keep this amount, this effort, this amount of work time invested into these plans actually really as much as necessary. That's why I highlighted that we should prepare plans that are brief, concise, and should contain information that is necessary. And you will see that actually over the research project, the amount of time invested and effort, like in this little small allotments or aliquots of time that you will invest over 3, 4, 5 years, depending on the project duration, will pay off at the end. Because you will have all these high quality data on one place, and especially if your findings will be appealing enough for a top tier journal, then you will not be afraid, scared to send those data and defend your findings in front of colleagues, in front of the community, and this data will stand actually there forever. So that's why I think these data management plans are actually in place, but of course we need to invest some time and effort, but not too much.
So it's not a waste of time.
No.
Maybe a short question. I'm a computer scientist, so I have trouble kind of considering software as a data, right? So why do we consider software as a data? And I mean, this is something that we developed, it's a tool. Our solution, basically, I don't know, chemists, they have some other type of solutions, machine engineers, something else, and so on. Why is software an exception here? So why do we consider our results as a data and not, I don't know, what your result is, for instance, of your work?
I would give you a simple answer, and probably a very naive one. Software is a language, right? It's, it's made out of data, right? I mean, the software that you can use it it's a series of lines, it's a language, right, full of algorithms that you can use. I see you don't agree with me.
No.
It's okay, fine. But as I told you, it's probably naive view of mine to treat software as a data.
And of course, it's convenient to store it, and I also agree that we also always put our software, publicly available and so on. But I have difficulties why it's treated differently than other results of other. Maybe because it can be done, right? It's easy to publish it somewhere. Probably some other work it's more difficult to do it. But I don't know, this relation to data. I mean, software definitely it's not data, right? It's software processes data, right? It's a tool to process data. But we can describe an algorithm in the paper, and then anyone can, if you do it in the right manner, anyone can program that algorithm, right? So where there is a need that we also have to publish the software itself, not only the algorithm in some understandable form as anyone else actually does.
Okay, I'll try to twist it, maybe try from different perspective. Maybe if you develop a software that is unique, maybe not available on the market, I would just consider it as an intellectual property. So it's something that is new, right? It's original. And you need somehow to protect this, right? At least I would do. So if it comes to something really, really original, or something new that you develop a software, an extension of software, this is something that it requires some copyright. So it's still, I think software is still, in its inherently, it's still data.
I mean, okay, if software is data, then everything is data, but maybe we can take this offline later on.
Great.
Okay, so Mozart has a short explanation, but I think this is a good topic for our workshop.
I can only relay information from the European Commission for Residential Projects. They consider as obligatory, as mandatory open science practices, open access to publications, and managing research data for fairness, and as open as possible as necessary, and enabling fair software and open as possible. It's a recommended practice. So software with the Commission is not considered as data. It's a research result, but not data, and not mandatory.
Okay, this is what exactly.
Thank you.
Okay, Profesor sedaj hvala za krasno predavanje. Nadaljujemo na delavnici, hvala občinstvu.
And also an alumna of the University of Ljubljana. Professor Fischer earned her BA degree and her PhD degree at the Department of Translation at our university, and she's currently employed in 3 places, if I understand well. So she's an associate professor at the Faculty of Arts, University of Ljubljana, and as a senior research fellow at the Institute of Contemporary History, as well at the Department of Knowledge Technologies, Josef Stefan Institute. Professor Fischer's fields of interest are corpus linguistics, digital humanities, and language technologies. She's one of the most active researchers in the field of language technologies associated with the Slovenian language, keeping our language resources up to date with the state-of-the-art technologies for which we are all very grateful. Apart from an excellent publishing record and collaboration and leadership in numerous projects, Professor Fischer holds many important functions in various chairs and committees. She has recently been appointed as Executive Director of Clarin ERIC to begin next year, which is one of the most important research infrastructures for social sciences and humanities in Europe. I'm very happy that she is here today. and will give a talk on the research infrastructure for language data Clarin. And again, her talk will be in English, but you're welcome to ask questions either in English or Slovenian. Daria, please.
Hello, good afternoon. Thanks a lot for having me. And I also think it's a really nice organic continuation of the previous talk, because now that you know what data is and why it's important to handle it well, I can also offer a solution to maybe half of the room or slightly less than half. But we will now be focusing on support for all the researchers that deal with research data in the form of language. This is in Slovenia and in the rest of European countries, and hopefully increasingly also globally, handled by the research infrastructure called Clarin, and the Slovenian node is called Clarin C, which I will present in my talk. So to basically just give a sort of a frame of my talk, I would just like to bring forward to your attention what it is that we mean when I say language data. It is not limited to linguistics for me and Tatiana and the colleagues from the Department of Linguistics at the Faculty of Arts. It's much, much broader. In addition to general or comparative linguistics, we also have lots of scholars that are dealing with the production of lexical resources like dictionaries or term bases. We also have a very big community, not just in Slovenia but in whole Europe, that deal with resources and research into language teaching, what it is that we need to pay attention to when teaching children languages, but also adult people foreign languages. There's a very broad and increasingly larger digital humanities community, like the entire field of literary studies that deal with distant reading of numerous books. There's lots of historical studies as well as political studies. Even in sociology, which could seem a little bit distant, they deal with a lot of textual data like newspaper data, tweets for example, but also a lot of survey data contains free text, so they also need to be able to handle language data. And finally, there's an important field also in computer science domain, which is computational linguistics, and they do supervised machine learning or unsupervised machine learning of language data to solve various tasks like information retrieval, machine translation, question answering systems, etc. And they also need lots of manually annotated training and testing data to be able to run experiments. When language data are treated in a way that we say are good or suitable, they're called language resources. There are of several kinds. We are mostly used to thinking of corpora when we talk about language resources, which are basically large text collections that are encoded in a uniform way and well documented. They also need to be selected based on some very explicit criteria. Very often they're also enriched with additional information, for example, linguistic annotations, what's a noun, what's the base form of a certain conjugated word, etc. But also with a lot of metadata. Who's the author of this text? How old is the author of this text? What gender is the author of this text, etc. There's also a difference between various kinds of corpora in different modalities. For example, we can talk about written text or spoken text, multimodal text, text in only one language, text in many languages, etc. Another kind of language resources would be the lexicons. These would be collections of words of various kinds, either focusing on morphology, syntax, semantics, or translations, but also formal ontologies that enable reasoning by machines. And finally, another very important type of language resources would be the language models, which enable software to annotate or analyze text in a certain language with a certain level of annotation or analysis. When we have language resources, we can reuse them, and you've already heard about the importance of data reuse in the previous talk. In our field in general, and especially I would say in Slovenia, most of the researchers are still handling their research in a very traditional approach. What does that mean? It looks like this. There's a PhD student that is very interested in exploring one certain topic, and they, in order for them to do an analysis, they first need to collect language data, create a language resource. Out of 4 years, maybe 3 would be filling with this data and making sure that you end up with a good collection, and then the last year would be rushing with the analysis and defending the thesis. As soon as this is done, you open a champagne, but then you're done, right? And then you forget about your language resource in some drawer. Nobody has access to it to be able to work on top of this, to ask more ambitious research questions, or to test the validity of your results. The bad sides, in addition to testing the validity of research results or asking more ambitious research questions, is also for the rest of the citizens, because we end up paying for the same kind of work many times. If many people are compiling the same kind of resources, then we're wasting a lot of time, a lot of money, and we're not making as good progress in science as we could be. Another negative aspect is that institutions monopolize certain areas of research, which means that it is less democratic and less accessible to everyone who's smart and interested in doing great work. And this is what open access can solve. They make sure that there's no barriers to access of research data, as well as publications. We encourage more cooperation instead of competition, and we also ensure better transparency of the scientific process, as well as improve the potential of innovation. With open access and good data management, we follow all the FAIR principles, while still keeping the fact principles in place. But as we have already heard in the discussion before, this is not just a nice story with only positive consequences, because there's lots of problems involved with making language resources open. The first barrier that all the linguists and all the people who are handling language data need to solve is a big one, which is a legal issue. A lot of the texts that we are handling with are copyright protected. So if we want to publish this research data with our research results, we first need to get in touch with the author of Harry Potter and make the author agree that we can republish our results. Good luck with that if this is a book that is being sold in millions of copies. Another big barrier for certain kinds of research and data collection is privacy protection. As you know, GDPR is in place, so when we are collecting data from subjects, like for example children, the elderly, or on sensitive topics, there's a lot of things that we need to solve before this data can be republished. And there's also terms of use. For example, if you collect data from Twitter, etc., terms of use is a big barrier, and they won't be able to talk to you, or they won't be willing to talk to you and make exceptions just for your research. And also, terms of use change all the time. So while you are collecting your data in your 3-year project, terms of use or terms of service can change multiple times, and then you will keep being asked to solve your problem again and again. Also, if you want to collect and republish your research data in a suitable way, this is a lot more work, because it needs to be well encoded, well documented, everything needs to work, and this is a lot more time consuming. A lot of these problems are also something that the whole community are faced with, so we also have experience and solutions. And one of these comes through the form of research infrastructures, in the form of equipment, resources and services that is then used in a specific scientific community in the field of humanities and social science, research infrastructures that are also very active in Slovenia. The area is for digital humanities, and Clarin is for language technologies and language resources. The goal of the Clarin research infrastructure is that we end up eventually with all the language resources digitized and all the tools available for all languages on the planet that are available through a single sign-on location for all the researchers in the humanities and social sciences, regardless of where they themselves are located. The infrastructure also takes care of long-term preservation as well as access to these resources and technologies, and in this way contributes to maintaining and supporting the multilingual European cultural heritage. It's a very new thing for the humanities, maybe less so for some other hard sciences, but in the humanities this is a new concept. So basically we offer not just tools and solutions, but we also need to invest a lot of energy and time in supporting and teaching how to adapt these tools and resources to specific research needs, as well as help people with standardization of resources and tools. Clarin ERIC is based in the Netherlands. There's more than 20 other countries that are members in addition to Slovenia. The ERIC level takes care of the overall framework through working groups and the central office, but actually the most work is done in the national consortia. What Clarin ERIC is offering is basically an opportunity for people to meet and to get information from each other. There's also lots of funding opportunities for short research stays, etc. Expertise in the form of knowledge centers where you have a specific question, you can access a specialized expert in this domain, etc. But Clarin C is probably more relevant to this community. It got started in 2014, and it combines all the relevant institutions in the country that deal with language data. It is based at the Stefan Institute, but the consortium is much bigger than this. It is composed of universities, research institutes, associations, and even companies. The services will be presented in more detail by my colleague Kaya in the workshop later on. So I just want to briefly mention that the Slovenian Clarin is most proud of the repository for the language data, which ensures long-term fair archiving of language resources and tools, as well as offering these deposited language data through concordancers so that users can even interact with the data, search for the data and perform analysis. There's also GitLab on offer, solutions for manual annotation of corpora, tools and workflows for automatic annotation of corpora, as well as conversion into TEI, which is a de facto standard for language data. A very important thing that Clarin C offers as well is the single sign-on solution, which deals with authentication and authorization. They use your EDROM or your university credentials so that you can identify yourself to the infrastructure, and then are offered the right level of access to unprotected but also protected resources. Let me just briefly go through the technical services that Clarin C has on offer. There are two concordancers that can handle really large data sets, billions of words. Right now it provides 50 corpora in almost 30 languages with over 14 billion words. In addition to text, you can also see the additional annotations in the corpora and explore them through concordancers in terms of structures, in terms of metadata, as well as linguistic annotations about words and parts of speech, etc. It offers a very rich query language like regular expressions, CQL, and offers immediate analysis and visualizations of the results. There's also a RESTful service for the URLs so that you can quote and fetch URLs that somebody else has prepared. There's a tool for manual annotation of the data for people who would like to delve into that. And it supports conversion formats from and into the right formats so that you can use it on any documents. And the most important, as I said, service is the repository, which offers long-term and safe archiving of language resources and technologies. And this is something that you would use at the end of your PhD when you have finished building your resource and you would like to deposit it somewhere. We offer explicit rules for both depositing and access, handle very different terms of use and licenses. There's lots of information on the ethical code of conduct and standardization of the metadata. If the metadata is formatted and offered in the right way, it's harvested not just by the Slovenian Clarin, but also by all other 20+ Clarins through a centralized virtual language observatory, so other researchers can find their data easily. We accept standardized encoding of data in the form of XML and TI, and we are very proud to be able to offer most data through open access licenses like CC BY. There's currently over 300 language resources and tools in the repository. And the last bit that I want to say today is once you have deposited your data, what you can benefit from this. Well, you in Clarin terms, you get a handle. This is very similar to a DOI, which you probably recognize from journal publications that you can then later cite. So everyone who has a resource deposited will have this piece of text automatically generated so that everyone else can then just copy-paste it in their publications, and then you get citations from other researchers. This is what a repository entry looks like. At the top you have the title of the language resource, then in yellow you have this citation snippet. In the blue window you see all the tools that this repository has been integrated with, and in the white box below you see all the metadata attached to this language repository. And then as you scroll down you see the description of the resource and the institution behind it, who's the publisher, etc. And finally you can reach this blue button, which is a download function, and you can even download the data and play with it yourself. There's information about licensing details, as well as an opportunity to access full metadata if you're interested in a more detailed description. That's it from me. To conclude, I would just like to congratulate you because you have just survived your very first intro into research infrastructures, data repositories, and Clarin SI. You will get a lot more practical information that is probably more directly relevant for you in the workshop from higher awards. A lot more useful information is available on the Clarin SI website, and the paper that I have shared with Tatiana, so you will be able to read about it in more detail. Do visit the website, and in case of any questions or problems, I advise you to read the website and the FAQ there and Google first. And if you still don't get an answer, then get in touch either with the basic info at Clarin SI or repository-related questions have a specialized email account. Thank you very much.
Questions? Shania? Okay, well, I have many questions, but let's say the first one. So you mentioned data protection and so on, like weather report and so on. So I remember there was a case of a strange order that was issued by Informacijska pooblaščenka, if I'm not wrong, if I'm not mistaken, a few years ago, because in our corpus, right, data corpuses like from different sources like newspapers and so on, of course you have, in a sense, personal information because the names are given, and that the corpus was kind of gigafida was banned or like couldn't be used, like, or you would have to hide the names. Do you know what happens then? I mean,
yes. So this main issue was because the corpus, the way it was put on a concordancer, it did not prevent Google from harvesting it and then having it findable directly from Google. So you would, if you type your name and you would appear in the corpus, you would get a Google snippet. That was the main problem. And if you deposit and have your corpora available through the Clarin concordancers, this is not the case. Nobody can Google for themselves and have results that arise from the corpus in the Clarin repository.
So this was the biggest
yeah. So here you need to log in with your university credentials. So it's not for everyone in the street, it's for research community. You need to log in, be identified, and then you get access to only the kinds of resources that are available to you based on your credentials. And then you also, they know that you're working with the data, and if you do something wrong, for example, you're in violation of the terms of service from Clarin. So it's not a fully open ecosystem, it's a research ecosystem for colleagues from the research community.
Okay, I see. Yeah.
If I just have a follow-up question. So first, really congratulates for, I would like to congratulate for really great repository, very clear, easy to use and so on. I'm working more in computer vision. We don't have something like that there, but I really like to have such a very strong research tool. But my question about IPR and also maybe, yeah, more about IPR. So in computer vision, I know that some researchers that had problems when they were collecting data sets by collecting images from the web, right? And since whoever published that image on the web did not publish it with the intention of being used for some research purposes and so on, so they had some problems with that. So in this case, I think this is even more problematic probably, if you have articles, books, or whatever. So how do you handle that? Or do you trust the researchers who actually publish their data corpora and so on in your repository? Did they take care of these copyright issues, or what is the policy with respect to that?
Yes, so the problem is real and sometimes impossible to solve. I can tell you this from my own experience as a researcher. It's one thing to use Wikipedia texts for your research because this is under an open license and without any problems. Another thing is if you use some niche author that you can call and invite for a coffee, and then they explicitly allow you to use their text, even though they are copyrighted. The third thing is to use some social media content that is under some terms of service, right? You have, for every source of text, you have very different issues you need to deal with. Sometimes you cannot even solve them. But the responsibility to handle this in a legal way and in an ethical way is with the author of the resource, so the researcher. So you as students need to do this well, and then what is given to the repository is given under the assumption that this has been handled properly. We cannot do this after the resource has been created, put on our repository, then it's too late to solve these problems. So this is something that you need to do before starting the collection process.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Anyone? Okay. Any other questions? Is there a question? No. Okay, just one last question. How many researchers store their data?
I don't know the... If you gave me 5 minutes to click on the repository, I could give you a list of all the authors that have something deposited. It's hundreds. But it's not the entire community that is active in Slovenia. It's just one part of the community that is living this spirit of sharing and publishing resource data. So I would say like a third or a quarter of the entire active community.
Okay, I see. Thank you. Če ni drugih vprašanj, bi s tem predavanjem zaključili, ne še potegniti, še 2 besede bi povedala, tako da dajem